Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watched on the WWE Network. Yesterday kicked off the new month, the new trend of reviewing old Backlash pay-per-views as seen on the network. So if you already missed it, go back here on the channel and watch my review of Backlash 1999 in your house. Today I'm talking all about Backlash 2000, which I thought was an even better pay-per-view overall than Backlash 1999. So let's get started here. Kicking off the show for the tag team titles, Edge and Christian defending against the newer version of D-Generation X, X-Pac and Road Dogg with Tori in their corner. So it was DX 2000, something a lot of people don't really remember about D-Generation X. To a lot of people, it was either Triple H and Michaels, Triple H, X-Pac, and the New Age Outlaws in China as well in 1998, 1999, and then the reincarnations in 06 and 09 and whatever else. D-Generation X 2000 did not really pan out for the better. My only gripe here, the only thing I didn't really understand, I love the match. That was a really, really fun match. I really, really enjoyed it. My only gripe with this matchup was that it wasn't really clear who the baby faces were. The crowd treated Edge and Christian like the faces here, but you would have never really known because I think they were heels coming out of WrestleMania 2000 when they won back or defended. I can't remember exactly. I know they came out victorious in that triangle ladder match and kind of revolutionized tag team wrestling. From that point forward, I thought they were the heels in that matchup, and in this matchup they were acting like baby faces in DX. They weren't overly booed, but they were acting like the heels. So maybe they were both heel teams. I'm not really sure, but bottom line, really, really fun matchup. Like I said, the tag team division was in a pretty good place for most of the Attitude Era. The triangle ladder match at WrestleMania 2000 was kind of the cherry on top of it all. But, that really kind of pushed the narrative that tag team wrestling was here to stay and one of the focal points of WWE during this time period. And this was only a prime example of that, with a really, really good match to kick off the show from Edge, Christian, X-Pac, and Road Dogg. Edge and Christian coming out victorious, still the WWF Tag Team title, so a really, really fun match to kick off the show, kind of kicking off the show on a high note here. Up next for the Light Heavyweight Championship, Dean Malenko defending against Scotty 2 Hotty. Kind of a random match on paper. Dean Malenko, the man of 1,000 holds, one of the best technical mat wrestlers there has ever been, not only in WWE, but wrestling history. Very underrated talent, in my opinion. Scotty 2 Hotty doesn't scream to me as he was in the Cruiserweight division when it was revamped in the mid-2000s. But he was always more of a tag team guy to me, and I'm sure to many other people as well, as a part of Too Cool. But the guy was still very impressive in the ring. I know you could say what you will about the finishing maneuver, the worm, and it just being dumb and stupid, but people were behind it. I think that goes without saying. I know it's one of the most unrealistic finishers of all time, but it was a very, very theatrical, fun finishing maneuver that people got behind. And the match itself was actually really, really good. They had a lot of cool spots. The light heavyweight division was, paled in comparison, obviously, to the cruiserweight division in WCW, and that was the only reason why WWE incorporated it. I know that goes without saying, but the only reason for the light heavyweight division was because they saw how successful and how great the matches were over in WCW with their cruiserweight talents. We got with guys like Jericho and Mysterio, and Malenko and Eddie and Juventud Guerrera and all those other guys, and they kind of made their own light heavyweight division, and it was never really the same. I know it only lasted a few years. It's not really the most. When you think back at the Attitude Era, you don't think of the light heavyweight division, and before they ended up folding it before they bought WCW and it kind of merged it into their own cruiserweight division over on the SmackDown brand up until 2007. But the match itself, though, I thought was really, really fun. Dean Malenko, like I said, one of the best of all time when it comes to technical wrestlers. Scotty 2 Hotty is kind of underrated as a performer as well, despite his unrealistic finishing maneuver. People were always behind him. He was always over, and a great and impressive athlete in his own right as well. The finish was brutal. I think Scotty 2 Hotty, I don't know what he was going for, but he and Dean Malenko were both on the top rope at the same time. Dean, it was an amazing visual. I had to watch it back and watch the replay. He jumped off the top rope and hit a DDT, like a standard DDT, jumping off the top rope and hitting, and the crowd gasped at the finish because it looked brutal. It could have broken his neck had it been executed poorly, but a great visual, put Scotty 2 Hotty down for the count, and saw Dean Malenko retain the light heavyweight championship. So a really fun match from those two. Up next, another tag team matchup with Big Boss Man and Bolt Buchanan taking on the Acolytes. Standard tag team match, nothing really special about it whatsoever. A lot of tag team matches on the card on this show and also at WrestleMania 2000. There was one tag team match one too many tag team matches at WrestleMania 16, 2000, whatever you want to call it. Not a single standard singles match on that card, a single, one-on-one matches on that card, which is kind of what bogged it down and made it feel very gimmicky, I guess, so to speak. And there's a lot of tag team matches on this show, too, but they were good tag team matches, and I enjoyed them all. This being the second of the three, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't a great matchup, it was kind of the worst of the three. But like I said, that's not really saying much and seeing how great the other ones are. And so it was kind of just the lesser of the three evils. I thought it was really, really good. So a good matchup from these guys. Really nothing to write home about. Big Boss Man and Boo Buchanan come out victorious with the victory here. Up next, a 6-man hardcore match for the hardcore title. As I've said before, the Hardcore Championship has always been a guilty pleasure of mine, specifically the 24/7 rule. I always thought that was awesome. It's kind of the case here, much like at WrestleMania 2000. It was a 6-man matchup. You had to pin the champion to come out victorious, and there was not a 15-minute time limit like there was at WrestleMania 2000. That was just a giant clusterfuck, and thankfully it was not like that whatsoever. Whoever was first to get a pinfall victory, I think, won the title. And Crash Holly, by the skin of his teeth, came out victorious still as the hardcore champion. But a really, really fun match, though. I mean, I didn't think it was as much of a mess, as much of a train wreck as the hardcore title match was at WrestleMania. Like, that was a pretty flawed concept, and I talked about it in that review, in that you had to pin the champion. So if that's the case, then why are there 30 guys beating each other up then instead of going after the champion? It was kind of a flawed concept, didn't make any sense, and kind of took my enjoyment away from it. Kind of took away from the matchup from an enjoyment perspective for me personally. Thankfully, this was kind of narrowed down to 6 great competitors, and also involving Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy, Perry Saturn, Taz, and Hardcore Holly, in addition to the champion Crash Holly. So a lot of great athletes, had a really, really fun matchup, and like I said, Crash Holly, as the underdog, barely winning matches, was always great in that role, coming out victorious here, still as the hardcore champion. Up next, Big Show versus Kurt Angle. Not really a match. It was more of an angle than it was a match. The story going into it, via the video package from what I saw, was, Big Show and Kurt. Kurt had just lost both of his titles at WrestleMania. He had lost the Intercontinental and European Championships at WrestleMania 2000 in a triple threat match with Benoit and Jericho. And I believe the McMahon-Helmsley regime had given him, or whatever the stable was at that time, had given Kurt Angle another shot at the tag team titles, and they handpicked his tag team partner, The Big Show. Now, Big Show was left off of WrestleMania 2000, which is mind-boggling considering how many people were on that show. But regardless, though, I mean, he was kind of a jokester at the time. He was doing impersonations of Rikishi, the Fat Bastard, Hulk Hogan on this show, and he was really good at it, but he was kind of treated like a joke. And Kurt Angle didn't like that, so he tried to bring the Beast outside of Big Show, and Big Show would target Kurt Angle from that point forward, leading to this matchup. So Big Show coming out with the Hulk Hogan theme song, Real American, which we had not heard in WWE for about 7 or 8 years by this point. But Kurt Angle was just kind of slapping around early on before Big Show kind of got more aggressive and just beat the living crap out of Kurt Angle. So the matchup was only 2.5 minutes. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a squash. Like I said, it was more of an angle than it was a matchup. I mean, if the bell rang and Big Show went immediately after Kurt Angle and just beat the shit out of him and won, then it would be a squash, but I understand what they're getting at here. Didn't really approve of the loss for Kurt Angle. I mean, of course, he would end up, winning the championship later on that year and becoming one of the biggest talents during the Attitude Era. But, having him lose at the Rumble, having him suffer his first loss to the Rumble, and then losing at WrestleMania, both of his championships, not regaining a single one in that period in time anyway, and then losing to the Big Show on this show is not the best way to further his momentum, but he was still a great, very entertaining athlete, regardless of whether he won or lost, so it didn't really matter. But for what it was, a fun matchup, just kind of throwaway, but, the Big Show impersonation was pretty comical, despite the fact I'm not the biggest Big Show fan, no pun intended. Up next, another tag team match with TNA, Test and Albert with Trish Stratus in their corner, taking on the Dudley Boys, Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley. Not really much more so than the matchup than it was the angle about the story going into it. So the story going into this matchup was that Bubba Ray was obsessed with putting the women's locker room through tables, involving Lita and Mae Young, and I believe somebody else that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. He was putting people through tables left and right, and just kind of having this dazed, expressionless, emotionless look on his face, and he was targeting Trish Stratus next, and every single time he tried to put her through a table, she would always try to seduce him, give him a kiss or whatever, make out with him. So it never come to fruition. The people were disappointed that they wouldn't get to see her eat wood, so to speak, get put through a table, as the commentator said it, which is pretty comical. An obvious joke. It was a lowbrow joke, but pretty funny at that. So that's what this matchup was all about. It was not really about the in-ring action, but I always really enjoyed the Dudley Boys. Having them come back at the Rumble, or just Bubba at the very least, hitting that theme song. You're going down, or we're going down, or whatever their theme song was that they used on the show, sent chills down my spine. I thought it was amazing. But the match itself was okay. A lot of interference from Trish, and TNA ended up coming out victorious. I mean, they were just kind of new in the block. The commentators established it as a big upset victory for TNA. So they got the win, but even despite that, the Dudley Boys came back, and Bubba Ray was infuriated, took out TNA, hit him with the 3D, or the Dudley Bomb, or whatever the hell they called it in WWE. And they went immediately after Trish Stratus, and she again tried to seduce him. Didn't work out. Bubba took her to the top rope, delivered a powerbomb to her through the table to an amazing pop. Crowd ate it all up, and the look that he had, the smirk that he had on his face was priceless. So a great angle. The match itself was not a classic, but the story itself, putting women through the tables was, so attitude era that, of course, that would never work in 2015. It did in TNA with Bubba Ray. He put Dixie Carter through a table, but that's not what women's wrestling should be about in 2015, but it was the attitude era, so you have to excuse it to an extent, and for what it was, that it was really entertaining. Up next for the European Championship, Eddie Guerrero defending against Essa Rios. And again, the matchup was good, nothing, mind-blowing, but again, much like the previous matchup, this contest was more so about the story being told with Eddie and Chyna, who were a very entertaining couple. Chyna coming out of the DX group was kind of being paired with Eddie, and the two were very entertaining pairing together. And that's really what this matchup was about. Chyna kind of counterparting Lita, serving as the counterpart to Lita, who was in the corner of Essa Rios. So a good match. Eddie Guerrero came out victorious, still the European champion. I think Lita would address Chyna after the matchup, so that was a sight to see. But the match itself was good, and Eddie and Chyna were a very entertaining couple via their the vignette and the backstage segment they had on early on before this matchup were very, very funny. Eddie was amazing in whatever he did, including in the stuff that he did with Chyna, which was great, and that was what kind of made this matchup worth watching. So a good match with a more fun, with a backstory to it. Up next, second to last matchup, Chris Benoit versus Chris Jericho for the Intercontinental Championship. Like I said before, it was at WrestleMania, the triple threat matchup that Benoit and Jericho were had switched titles. I think Kurt Angle was the going in was the Intercontinental and European champion, defending both belts in a triple threat against Benoit and Jericho in a 2 out of 3 count falls match. I think Benoit won the Intercontinental Championship, and Jericho took home the European Championship, which he would lose anyway to Eddie Guerrero between WrestleMania and this pay-per-view. So Jericho was then feuding with Benoit over that championship, having a great wrestling match, as you would only expect from Benoit and Jericho. Really, really good matchup. The finish was a bit messed up, not even messed up, it was a bit, shady. I believe there was a ref bump at one point in the matchup, and I think Jericho accidentally hit the ref, and even though he had the win in the bag, I think when the ref got back up, he called for the bell, so people were a little bit confused as to whether Benoit was disqualified or Jericho was disqualified, because I think Benoit used the belt at one point, and Jericho got disqualified, and Benoit not only retained his title, but he also won the match. So, I don't know it was a weird finish, but it protected Jericho in defeat to prevent him from getting defeated here, and also keep the chase going for Jericho in his valiant attempt to regain the Intercontinental Championship. But, finish aside, I understood where they were coming from. Not the most well-executed finish. I understood why it was done, though, and the match itself was very, very good and kind of made up for it, with Benoit still the Intercontinental Champion. So that brings us to our main event between The Rock and Triple H for the WWF Championship, with, much like the year prior, or I think, 1999, much like in 1999, Shane McMahon serving as the special guest referee, with the odds stacked against Rock this time instead of Stone Cold Steve Austin, so kind of a 180. But this was the match that should have served as the main event to WrestleMania 2000, a really dragged out matchup. Like I talked about it in my WrestleMania 2000 review a couple weeks ago, a complete mess of a matchup. Big Show and Mick Foley had no right being in that matchup. Their involvement was kind of pointless. But when it came down to Rock and Triple H, the match was not bad. In fact, it was actually quite good. Rock and Triple H have always had great chemistry dating back to their various clashes over the Intercontinental Championship in the late 90s and over the WWE Championship in the year 2000. With Austin being out with an injury, Rock and Triple H kind of carried that year to prominence. They single-handedly carried 2000 in the WWE Championship picture, so they deserve all the credit. So another interesting side story of this matchup was that it was announced to counterpart Shane being the referee and Mr. McMahon and Stephanie McMahon and everyone being in Triple H's corner, that Stone Cold Steve Austin, who, like I mentioned before, who was out with a neck injury and recovering from surgery, would serve. He would be in the corner of Rock for this matchup. So throughout the show, they were updating us on the whereabouts of Austin. They had no idea where he was. And I think it was right before this matchup, I think Vince took the mic and said, "We apologize if you were expecting him, but Stone Cold will not be here tonight." And they didn't explain why. Of course, it was their own undoing, of course, that served as the reason why that Stone Cold wasn't there. They tried to do everything in their power to ensure that he wouldn't show up. So I think the crowd kind of knew that by that point, that, Austin isn't showing up. I think that, when they say that Austin wouldn't show up, they're going to show up 9 out of 10 times. Whenever they say that someone is not going to be there, they ended up showing up anyway. And that was the case on this show, because once it came down the stretch, Rock and Triple H kind of going at it. And the spot that I thought happened at WrestleMania, or Backlash in 1999, actually happened on this show, with Rock taking out Triple H and Shane with a double rock bottom, both in the same arm, right through the commentating table. So a great spot, a great visual, taking those two out. But it wasn't enough to put away Triple H. Vince, I think he knocked out Rock with the championship belt, and he enlisted the help of the Stooges, the insider referees, Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe. So they came down to screw over The Rock, who again kicked out at 2. So they continue to unleash all hell on The Rock before you hear the glass shatter. The place goes nuts, in which people credit as the single greatest pop in WWE history. I don't know if I can attest to that. I haven't seen all of wrestling. Maybe there was a bigger pop, but from what I've seen anyway, I can absolutely believe that I do credit this moment as one of, if not the single greatest pop I've ever seen anyway. Watching this back 15 years later still gave me chills. That it was an amazing moment. Like I said, people are probably expecting Austin, considering the fact that they were beating down Rock. It was drawn out to the point where maybe people just lost hope. But when that glass shattered, that place came unglued, and the reaction was unreal. So Austin comes down, lays out Triple H with a chair shot to the gut, lays out Briscoe and Patterson with chair shots to the head, takes out Mr. McMahon in the ring. He brings down, or Linda actually comes down to the ring with Earl Hebner in tow, and she pushes Stephanie down to the ground, which apparently she's injured from. I don't know who was on. Oh, it was Paul Heyman and Jim Ross on commentary. A very underrated commentary duo, by the way. I think they're very, very good, and often don't get the credit they deserve. I always thought they were a great pairing together, 10 times better than anything we hear nowadays on commentary. I think that goes without saying. But, Austin taking out Vince, then he takes out Triple H with a stunner, and Rock takes him out with, I think, a belt shot to the face or something like that. I think maybe with a people's elbow. So Linda comes down to the ring, takes out Stephanie with Earl Hebner. The non-crooked referee gets the 1, 2, 3. Rock celebrates his championship victory. Crowd goes ballistic once again. An amazing moment. Rock and Austin celebrating in the ring. Once bitter rivals, now best of friends. They would, later become bitter rivals once again going into WrestleMania 17. And I think the original plan was to do Rock and Austin at WrestleMania 2000 before Austin got hurt. I think that was the long-term plan. But of course, didn't come to fruition due to the circumstances. But they got their moment on this show, an amazing moment, a great matchup, a really, really entertaining matchup. Not even down the stretch, but in its entirety. The interference, like the Attitude Era was known for, was played perfectly. It was very, very well done in this matchup, with the involvement of McMahon, all the McMahons, every single one, Shane, Stephanie, and Linda, and Shane, Vince, Stephanie, and Linda, all had great involvement. All played their roles very, very well in this contest. And Rock and Austin were over like crazy. And Triple H deserves credit as well for being so great in the ring and delivering in a main event level, a WrestleMania tier matchup. WrestleMania main event tier matchup on this show. And like I said, this is the matchup that we should have seen at WrestleMania. Not all the bullshit with Big Show and Mick Foley, who was not, in the best of shape by this point. And I don't blame him. They called him up, only weeks before WrestleMania, asking him if he would like to be a part of it. when he already assumed he was pretty much done with wrestling, so I can't really blame him for taking a payday or selling out or whatever. I would have done the same exact thing. But this should have been the match. And I understand they wanted to do the McMahon in every corner. I get that. That was the narrative they were trying to tell. It was entertaining, and it led to a huge buy rate. There's no doubt about that. But the match itself on that show was terrible, and it made this, it made this matchup 10 times better. I mean, in its own right, had that matchup not even happened, this still would have been a fantastic matchup. But compared to the main event at WrestleMania the year prior, or the month prior, it was one of the best things of the Attitude Era. It was just a fantastic match all around, closing out what I thought was an excellent pay-per-view from start to finish. I thought Backlash 1999 was really good. I thought this was even better. The show on the whole, I thought was really entertaining from a storyline standpoint, an in-ring standpoint. Maybe I enjoyed the final few matches because they had more of a storyline behind them. They had more of a story behind them than the year prior. I thought, even the less than great matches. And we had some great wrestling matches on this show involving, including the opening matchup between Edge, Christian, and DX. Malenko and Scotty 2 Hotty I thought was really, really good. The hardcore match was fun. Big Show and Angle was a fun squash angle for what it was. The main event was phenomenal. But, even the final few matches I thought that, weren't great. The tag team matchup with TNA and the Dudley Boys and Eddie Guerrero and Essa Rios had some storyline significance behind them, so that's what made them worthwhile, made them fun, and made them worth watching. And also involving the Benoit and Jericho matchup, a great wrestling matchup in its own right that I forgot to mention before. But on the whole, though, a great show. Really, really enjoyed it. Absolutely, I would recommend. Goes without saying that you should go back and watch this on the WWE Network, especially if you're a huge Attitude Era fan. Made WrestleMania 2000 look like complete shit if it wasn't already. Not a great pay-per-view in my opinion, but I thought this show specifically was just phenomenal. I thought everything about it was just fantastic. Start to finish, had everything you can look for in sports entertainment, professional wrestling, whatever the hell you want to call it. Great wrestling, great angles, great execution. The crowd was hot the entire night. So a really fun pay-per-view from start to finish. So I'll be back on Tuesday with my review of Backlash 2001 as we continue my reviews of Backlash for the next couple of weeks. But if you want to support the show, you can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant. Follow me there. Like me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews. The link is down below. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. Like I said before, review of Backlash 2001 on Tuesday. So stay subscribed and stay tuned until then. Once again, guys, have a great Sunday, have a great week, and I'll speak with you guys on Tuesday.